All right, let's get ready to dive into John's Gospel. This video is going to look at an overview of the first chapter of John, verses 1 through 18. I gave a prologue to this study. Well, this is John's prologue to his Gospel. This prologue is going to make a rather audacious claim. And then the rest of the book, the rest of his Gospel, from chapter 119 on to the end, are John expanding on that, or why he believes what he believes. We're going to ask this passage 3 questions, which will lead to the ultimate question. The first question is, does the culture of the day have any bearing on the situation? Because, see, John was speaking to 2 basic groups of people: Jewish people, non-Jewish people, Gentiles. The Jewish religious community is being addressed in this passage, but he's also addressing the philosophy of the Greek culture, because he was living in a Greek/Roman city, Ephesus at the time. Now, the second question is, does the language of the day have any bearing on what we're going to be studying? Yes, we've got good translations, but the fact of the matter is, Greek is a 3-dimensional language, and English sometimes just comes off flat. There's some nuances in Greek and Hebrew that will perhaps add to our understanding of this passage. And lastly, does John's personal context come into play here? Now, if we answer those 3 questions, they will lead us to the ultimate question that we will also ask. And that really is the bottom line for this passage and any passage we're going to be reading here in the Gospel of John. What did John say? What did John mean? I'm not going to ask a question about whether you believe what John said. We just want to come to a conclusion about what John said. Everybody's going to make up their own minds. John made up his mind. So this first 18 verses is going to tell us what the rest of the book is about. All right, let's get started. Verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Well, I gave you a prologue to this book, gave you the backstory, if you will. Verses 1 through 18 in chapter 1 of John's Gospel, it's John's prologue. In fact, everything you want to know about what John believes is in verses 1 through 18. And the rest of John's Gospel, from chapter 1, verse 19 to the end of the book, plays a support role. He makes a statement, and the rest of it just shows why he believes this to be true, whatever this is. Now, if verses 1 through 18 is a prologue for the rest of the book, verse 1 is a prologue to the prologue. Verse 1 encapsulates what John believes. Verses 2 through 18 merely expand on what verse 1 says. So let's look at verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, remember I said I was going to ask a couple questions, right? What does the culture of the day have to do with it? What does the language of the day have to do with it? And what does John's personal situation have to do with it? Well, let's take a look at the culture first. In the beginning of the Christian church, it was considered a sect of Judaism, and in fact enjoyed a certain protection from the Roman government because of that. But as time moved on, Christianity and Judaism began to split. Gentiles started coming into the church. Paul the Apostle started teaching things about how they didn't have to obey all the ritualistic things that Judaism was practicing at the day. There began to be a split, and the Roman government actually began to see that Christianity was not Judaism. And it started to erode their special protections. And as we all know, there was a lot of persecution of Christianity by the Romans during the first century. So there were two groups of believers, really, two groups of people that John would be addressing here. A Jewish culture with its Jewish beliefs and thoughts, and a Roman culture with, its overriding Greek philosophy and thoughts. And that's why this opening statement is so powerful. In the beginning was the Word. I don't think it's an accident that John referred to Genesis 1:1 in this first statement. In the beginning, God. Genesis 1:1. Here, in the beginning, the Word. The Jewish culture, Jewish religious culture, would have no problem with what John was saying here. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In fact, the Word of the Lord was a name that was used to identify the Lord in Jewish scripture and in Jewish thought. They had many, many names for God, and the Word of the Lord, well, that's one of those names. So when John was saying, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, the Jews were going, yeah, okay, got it. In their thinking, this concept of the Word, it wasn't an abstract extension of God, it was God. Now, their word for it, I believe, was Mimra. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I'm sure I'm not, because I can't handle pronouncing Jewish words. I seem to mess them up. But it means the basic same thing. It's the extension. It's the Word. It's the Lord. The Word of the Lord was God. They get it. But now to the Greek side of the house, the Greek philosophy side of the house, they would have a problem with this. One of the primary philosophies of the day was Stoicism. And in Stoic belief, they did believe in a logos, which is the word, Greek word for word, logos. They did believe that the logos was a impersonal power, if you will, that united and tied together all things in the universe. In fact, if it sounds familiar to you, it's because the last 8 or 9 episodes of Star Wars movies all deal with the Force, and that was the guiding principle of describing the Force in the Star Wars movie, an impersonal force that can be used for good or for evil, but it unites and connects the entire universe together. They would have a problem with what John was saying here, because John was saying, in the beginning was the Word, or logos, the Greek word. The logos was with God. Okay, so far. And the logos was God. This is where John starts to part company with the Greek philosophers, because he's saying this logos, this word, this unifying force that ties the universe together, it's not an impersonal thing. It's God. So in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. And the Word was God. Jewish culture would say, okay, we're fine there. Greek culture, not so much. So John is dancing a dance here, and he's speaking hard truth to the Greek world. He's going to speak some hard truth to the Jewish world here in a second. But let's continue on with this. In the Greek language, and let me preface this by saying I am not a Greek scholar. I have some tools that I use, and I have some valuable people that I draw on for advice, some pastors. But in the Greek word, the Greek translation of John 1:1, it could be translated like this. In the beginning was the Word is with God, and God was the Word. The order of words in Greek mean something. And the fact that in the Greek language, and I put the Greek translation up here for you, it shows that the last phrase, the word for God, is the first part of that phrase. We say in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Grammatically, totally correct. Semantically, totally correct. But if we were to be a little bit more literal, we would say in the beginning was the Word is with God, and God was the Word. That's important. It's important to John to let his people know that God was the Word.